Come to order. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Paul J. Brasco. Kathleen Harris. Joseph LaCava. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Randall LeBlanc.
Present.
Daniel P. Romard.
Present.
Chairman Vidal.
Present.
Okay. 4 present, 1 absent.
I would like to acknowledge that this meeting will be recorded. Introduce yourself, sir.
Chris Campbell.
Chris Campbell will be recording this video. Thank you. First item on the agenda.
First item on the agenda is a resolution about sidewalks not being included. No. Yes, so someone's gonna do that.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Minutes have been approved. All right. Mr. Clerk.
Okay. First item is a resolution on sidewalks not being cleared that was brought in by Councillor Fowler.
All right, hear from our committee member, Councillor Fowler.
My resolution.
Oh, that's right.
Anyways, the reason I brought in this resolution is because of complaints about the unsafe conditions of kids walking to school. I'm sure the superintendent and Public Works Director got copies of some of the emails, so they know, you know, the problem. And I guess what I'd like to hear is who makes these decisions that there's school or not school? When they make the decision, are they aware of these sidewalks, say, that wasn't cleared for a particular reason or no reason? And if that's part of the decision, do we notify the I can't think of your title, school resource officer? You know, if she's made aware of it and, you know, what we do. I mean, if we know there's a problem, do we do anything about it? You know. And whoever wants to, I get, who I had asked to come in was the Public Works, Consolidated Public Works, and the superintendent to talk about it. I don't know if there's anyone else here that's part of it and would like to, might have something to add, that's fine too. So, I mean, I have a motion to keep.
I'd like to make a motion here from our committee member, the superintendent or director of Public Works. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
I can start on the process for school closures or delayed, and then Mr. Chiasson can kind of go from there if he has anything to add. So in terms of making a decision around to close or have a delay of school, we receive multiple different types of reports through Mr. Chiasson's office that give us good data around what the weather reports were telling us around the conditions specifically in Waltham. And we use that and based on sort of what we're able to get from the news to make informed decisions around whether or not there's going to be school. So I'm on a text exchange with about 7 or 8 different superintendents from the area to get feedback from them about what they're hearing from their DPW and police departments. And generally, that evening before a storm, I'll be on the phone with our facilities department as well as Officer Frassica, who's the lead SRO for the Waltham Police Department, asking for their feedback on what's going on the ground in Waltham. Officer Frassica will be communicating with Bobby Pratt, who is in charge of dealing with the sidewalks, and that is part of the discussion that we have relative to school closure or delay, or whether or not we're going to just have a regular opening to school. And generally, I think we've followed patterns that are consistent with other school districts and tried to make the best possible decision given the facts that we have.
Yeah, so I, you know, throughout the night and mornings, and you know, we're in constant communication with facilities, drop-in zone we talk to all the time. Ann and Bob talk, Bob and I talk, and I talk to Dan. You know, if you see, I passed up the maps of all the just school sidewalks that we're supposed to clear. So there's approximately 50 miles of sidewalk, just on the school routes that we have to clear, and depending on the size of the storm and the length of the storm. The program that we have now, is a lot better than previously had. You know, I won't say it's perfect, obviously the sidewalks get missed, when we have large amounts of snow, it's tough to see over the snowbanks and whether or not, you know, an area is done or not done, and sometimes it looks done and it hasn't been completed, sometimes it's been done and it doesn't look. You know, I know the area of concern that brought this up, there was different factors. We had a tree branch down, getting in and out of the machines, with snowbank on one side and either walls or snow on the other side. The doors, it's not easy to get in and out, and so typically we go around and, you know, the idea is to come back, you know, on your way back and get it, or in the morning, and they continue on their route, and, you know, that section, I think it was probably 100 feet that did get missed, and then once we knew about it and were aware of it in the morning, you know, it's to check we try and check all 50 miles of sidewalk, and, but there's gonna be stuff we don't see and that we miss, and try and get back to it as soon as we can. You know, and the school stuff is priority that we get back to, what people call, you know, once we're made aware of it, and go out and take care of it.
Are the people who actually do the sidewalks, should they be telling you we couldn't do that section? Because I know the problem was a tree down, or branches or whatever that they, do they, when they come back, tell you that, you know, we didn't get that section because? Do you ever hear from anyone?
Me personally, no, but
whoever's the
yeah,
overseer.
you know, there's areas when they know they haven't finished a route where they'll tell, because,
Yeah.
you know, so these guys start, we start during a storm now to try and get ahead of it, or at least stay on top of it, so we're not trying to move
Well,
22.
this was an exceptional storm
Yeah.
too, but, so.
Well, there was a difference, though. The inches weren't a lot, but the amount of trees and other items. The other thing with the trees down, people that do that route, getting off of those routes to go to the trees, and, you know, there's different factors in every storm. You know, and this is just the one issue. I know there's
What?
probably other sidewalks that.
Yeah, I'm sure, but they didn't send me emails, they called my house. But, you know, I mean, I'm hoping you're all done for the year with the snow.
I don't think that that's the case.
I don't know, there's some people are talking, it's kind of moving farther away, but we're hopeful.
I'll guess 10 inches then.
But, I mean, the winter's almost over, but if we look at something that, you know, when someone knows they didn't do a section, that somehow that gets relayed to everybody, and if it's, especially on a busy street like Lexington Street, you know, that maybe, you know, whether it has to be one of the school resource officers or someone from the police, just to make sure that the kids aren't walking. I mean, Lexington Street, I get down there 40 in a 30-mile-an-hour zone, and people are just blowing by me 50, so, I mean, really, you know, they have other gripes which really, it's a different issue. We're having a neighborhood meeting about the sidewalks and stuff, which we're not gonna address now, because that's not anything that you guys could fix. So, I mean, personally, I just think maybe there has to be some way to make sure it's communicated in the future, when they know we couldn't do that section because of a tree. And the kids are going out in the street, they're gonna have to walk in the street, because that, one of the other things that has been brought up was, and I know it won't fly on the traffic commission, was the, putting a crosswalk at Curve Street to go across. And I know that has been looked at in the past and has been turned down because it wasn't a safe place for a crosswalk. So, so
Yeah.
that walkway on the west side of the street really has to be done, because those kids from my neighborhood all walk it. So, I mean, somehow,
We
Yeah.
made changes the last storm, when the routes go out of how they hit that side. You know, we always have a guy on the east side of Lexington Street who goes up, and now the guy, the person who's going to Lake Street hits that section on his way up, and then continues on the rest of his route.
And we checked that sidewalk at 6 AM the next morning, and it was done exceptionally well.
It's just I said you check 90% of a route and you expecting that last 10%.
no, I understand when the
and
plow goes by, half the time they knock the snow back onto the sidewalk.
No, and that's,
But, you know, this was like an exceptional case where the trees were down, they couldn't do it, and, you know, somehow they got lost in the mix and kids were forced to walk.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many actually, because I see more people going to school getting dropped off than I see walking, but, you know, if one kid was in the street and get hit, that would be one too many, so. That's all I have.
Councillor
Thank you,
Romard.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Director of Public Works. Mr. Chiasson, does every school have the same amount of, I guess I'll call it mileage, in
No.
terms of what gets plowed?
I don't believe so.
No. Just because looking at these maps, I mean, if I look at, say, the last one, Whitemore School has many streets around it, some of the small streets that are close to it, all being plowed. But you look at MacArthur School, and it's 2 streets. They're pretty lengthy, but there's several neighborhoods in there that aren't getting plowed. Same thing if you look at Northeast School, a huge perimeter of the area is being plowed all the way down to Forest Street, but nothing in the middle, those streets, yet, you know, McDevitt and some of the others, Fitzgerald has, you know, those inner streets close to the school done. So how does this get decided?
So it was done, number 2013, I think we came up with a list. Every sidewalk will never get done.
No, I know that,
You
for
know,
sure.
the best
but-
way to do that is if council puts in an ordinance that makes everyone show their own sidewalks. And then it will be done, especially if you're gonna look at businesses who aren't made to do it.
Yeah, but I don't wanna go there at this point,
Oh, I
I'm
know
just
you don't
saying,
wanna go
but.
there, but that's the way it's
So
gotta
you and
be.
the school committee decided this?
No, no, we did it, it was, I don't know if it was me or we sat with Ann, and I think they went through it with principals to go over where, I mean, it's the main walking routes where you try and funnel kids to. Kids take different ways to school, but we can't do every side street, I mean, there's a,
Understood, you can't do everything,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to find
I
some
mean, if you look at like
rationalization
Fitzgerald,
for,
we could do every street in that neighborhood and warn them. There's a child on every street, all the way to Main Street. And it's, they would never get to, and, you know, a lot of those, they have to walk in the street, or they have to, you know, and they usually with parents, it's tight down there anyway, and everyone knows. And you're not talking main roads where, the kids, you know, cars.
I'm
going
just
fast.
wondering if this is, was this developed as a convenience for you because they're larger streets? Or was it around, you know,
It was
safety
a way
of the
to
kids?
safely get the kids to school on through the main roads where, you know, there's heavy traffic and people are driving faster than on the
So
side.
the thought would be that they would walk out to the main street and.
Or to that main walking route, and it's based on where they put, the crossing guards. You know, to get the children through the crossing guards so that they can safely cross them at certain streets.
Well, I would just suggest, given that and looking at these, that you might wanna relook at MacArthur School. That seems pretty, barren to me in terms of what we're looking at here, and then,
The
also.
I didn't know, the other issue was the MacArthur School area, or is that Northeast? MacArthur, there's very few sidewalks on any of those side streets.
And that could be the case, I don't know.
No,
I'm trying to think, but, yeah, just if we
That's-
could revisit that or take a look at it, it just seems, there's lots and lots and lots of houses there, but, didn't see that any roads were being plowed for kids to easily get to school. That's all.
Is it okay if Officer Brasco
Yep.
says anything?
Good evening, thank you. A lot of those areas around the MacArthur School and the Northeast School, most of those students are bused. So that's why the sidewalk areas around those schools may not be as much as, say, for example, the Whitemore School or the Plimpton Elementary
Yeah,
School.
yeah.
They have a large walking population, so that entails more sidewalks to get done. And Mike and I sat down, I think it was in 2013, and we kind of mapped out the way where all the crossing guards are located. So for schools that don't have as many sidewalks, that would be because the majority of the students are bused.
So you were involved in the process as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, okay.
Yep.
All righty, no, thank you.
Thank you very much. Just around Councillor LeBlanc.
Thank you. Director Chiasson, would you be willing to update your standard operating procedures so that if there is an incident similar to that which occurred where they couldn't do the area because a tree was down, that the person, you know, who was there, that, I mean, it's just, again, part of SOP, that they're supposed to notify you? Could you would be willing to do that? I think that would help. And just for the superintendent, not your first winter here. I know this has been an exceptionally crazy winter, but how do the complaints this year compare? How are we doing?
I've only received one set of complaints that is consistent with the complaints that Mr. Fowler has communicated. Those are the only complaints that I've heard about.
They weren't my complaints, I forwarded.
No, I didn't mean your complaints, but the ones that you were discussing.
So that's not bad, because people know where to find you, and you know, and I too, it was the only one received. I mean, again, we don't want any complaints, we don't want any situations, but, I mean, all things considered, I think you all did a great job.
No, I mean, I agree, in general, it was.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
Councillor LeBlanc still has the floor.
I'm good,
Okay.
thank you.
First time around, Councillor Darcy.
Yeah, thank you. As to the Northeast School, the school department has two primary evacuation routes, one to Our Ladies and one to the Gann Academy, and those sidewalks were plowed within a day after the storm. So that's the most important thing. If there's a problem, emergency at the school, how do the school children walk to the safe zone? And until we have a sidewalk ordinance, because the city doesn't have the resources to plow every sidewalk, the fire department does not have the resources to dig out every fire hydrant. Until we have an ordinance that mandates that people plow their sidewalks, then they're not gonna get done unless we allocate huge amount of money for the sidewalk clearing. So I just wanna thank them for all the work that they've done, and I've got no complaints, at least in the Northeast School.
Thank you, Councillor Darcy. Councillor Harris, come around.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first commend, I think this last storm was a doozy. You know, it really, I mean, did down trees and limbs and everything. And if you look at the Whitemore School, which is the area that actually is in Ward 8, there are a lot of walkers. There's a lot of congestion, there's a lot of drop-off, and then we also have buses. It's very thickly settled. There's lots of street parking. There's also the need to have to park at the school sometimes and then need to clear that. And I would say 2 storms ago, there were issues on Lowell Street where it wasn't totally cleaned, and we shared those issues back with DPW, and you guys were able, I think this last storm, to clear effectively. I think people do complain from time to time, you know, like not being able to park at the school or not understanding when school's gonna be closed. But I do have to say overall, I think you guys do a great job, and I think it's just a matter of refining, you know, the communication we're all part of that chain, and anything I can do to help, I certainly will. But I just wanna say this last storm, I think you guys did do a good job in Whitemore, whatever was done for that to communicate school being closed, allowing neighbors to park in that school parking lot. I mean, before I got complaints this time, I got positive things, so I think those should be shared. And I just wanna, thank you guys for the work that you do, and I think as we move forward here in this next storm, if we hear anything, we'll obviously report that back to you, but overall, I think the work at the Whitemore, which is very challenging, it's a very challenging environment, is done very well.
Can I just comment on Councillor Harris? I think that one of the challenges for us is that there are certain storms where we know we're not gonna have school,
Yeah.
right? We just know that there's no way we're gonna get 15 inches of snow, school is not gonna happen, so there's no problem for us to open up our parking lots and let as many people that want to park there, because we know that there's no hurry for us to get that lot cleared. I think the challenge is when the forecast is a little unclear about the timing of the storm, and or if the accumulation is such that there is a potential that we could have school. It makes it very challenging for us if that lot is used and cars are not removed from 7 until 7 a.m. and then have 2 hours. It's really hard for us to get the lots cleared over and be able to have school, and potentially even difficult to have a delay because we just can't get all the lots turned over in time. So that's the challenge that we have, and certainly we try to be as communicative as we can and can try to make those decisions as early as possible. Sometimes the data allows us to make those decisions early, and sometimes we can't make that call until our 4 a.m. phone call when we're actually seeing what happens on the ground.
Thank you. All set, Councillor Harris? All set?
Yes.
All right. First of all, Councillor Randall LeBlanc. Yeah, I just want to convey the sentiments. Director Chiasson, I called you a few times during the winter. A couple of constituent complaints I got. It was on the weekend, you answered your phone, you went up there, I checked back with them, and then the next storm, and whatever issues they did have on that particular storm were not the same issues on the next one. And even, I happened to call you on yesterday, Sunday, storm overflow, and you answered your phone again, and so I want to thank you for your response on that, and appreciate that. Thank you. Councillor Fowler?
Yeah, just one.
Go ahead.
I talked to several people after the storm, and with the exception of that sidewalk issue, almost everybody had good things to say about the snow removal. Around 8 o'clock, the night of the storm, I got my truck out and I drove around, and I was surprised how clear almost every street in the ward was. There was a couple that had 3 or 4 inches of snow. Obviously, they had been kept clear as much as, and they hadn't got their last sweep yet, but there was still trucks around the area. So a couple of the places that sometimes Autumn and Ware that get done kind of at the end of that section, they were down there doing the final push through there. So in general, I thought it was one of the better jobs of keeping the streets going, considering the amount of storm. Buddy of mine who's in Florida gives me a hard time all the time about the snow, who lives up that area. My street done, so I actually took a picture and texted it to him to show his street so he wouldn't be complaining. So, anyways, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fowler. Were you looking to file this, or what do you wish at this point?
Yeah, I mean, we'll file it, because if we have another problem, hopefully not, bring in a new resolution, I mean, it's
Shovel for everyone.
but,
Mr. Chair,
I
I'll
just
make a
thought
motion.
we needed a discussion about because the people who are concerned.
Yeah, well, like I said, we've changed that, so those people, we're gonna have issues, it's gonna happen. It's not gonna be perfect every time, and the storms are all different. Your feedback, when we get especially consistent issues that keep going from storm to storm, that even if you call the office, I may never know about them. So if it's an issue, because they go into a work order, someone takes care of them, and okay. But if it's an issue that keeps popping up that you're sick of hearing about, then I get sick of hearing about it. So we can try and take care of it and make it better for all. So stuff that you keep getting, let me know, so that way we can really change. We're doing something wrong there and we need to change it. So I need to be able to hear about it. So
Thank you. We got a motion on the floor from Councillor Romard to file. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion on file. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next one is the resolution from Councillor LeBlanc about expanding the parking near the Moody Street train station.
Thank you very much.
Councillor LeBlanc, we were requesting the full council on this. Did you bring your mind or?
Yes, we do.
We did.
Yeah.
It was referred to committee, but did you bring in a request to full council to invite the traffic engineer in, or are we doing that now?
No.
On this, I did not.
Okay.
Okay.
Because he's here on the, your other.
On the other one.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. We can make a
Do you want to do
request.
the,
Make a request, for the traffic commission to look into this.
Okay. Bring them over to the committee. Okay.
To have it at the next meeting. Sounds good.
Motion to table this.
we have a vote on this request first?
The request to invite the party here for the next committee meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. You guys have it.
Okay. Now we'll table it.
Take a motion to table resolution on parking at near the train station.
Thank you very much. The motion, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no. You guys have it.
Okay, next up, someone's gonna take this one, next one.
All right. I'll take the resolution regarding the veteran skating rink parking off the table.
Motion, all in favor say aye. Opposed say no.
Councilor LeBlanc, copy of the resolution. This is, I think this might be, yeah, that's it. I brought in a resolution going to the skating rink frequently. It's apparent that we're probably 10, 12 parking spots short on a consistent basis. And I've counted, just when I go there, I've counted how many cars typically park across the street, 5 to 8. And what's changed in the use of the skating rink, I don't know, was 3-4 years ago, they went to half-ice hockey, which now the mites and the tykes, so there's double the amount of people there, and the change of it, the guard, or now it is, seems to be a dozen people parking across the street, and everyone's aware it's a sort of a high rate of speed, and if the families crossing with their hockey bag, it's definitely a hazard. And we've spoken with the director, and we've looked at a couple of different things, and I reached out to the state because it's a DCR lease. And Article 97, I did not get an answer back, we're gonna look into it, whether you might be able to answer it. But Article 97 kicks in that, can you make parking in the front right quadrant of it, add a couple of spots there? Could be more of a challenge, the city owns the land up the top, which might be easier. And then we did review the back, which we can speak with him about the parking on the street, but if you wanna fill us in on.
Yeah,
Let
me just make the motion.
Sure.
You're gonna make the motion to hear from.
I'd like to make a motion here from committee member, the 2 directors. Parking recommended. The motion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Go right ahead.
So we did look across the street in the front right portion, like you talked about. I did meet with the state and ask them about that. We do actually have to file a request. Anything we do, because of the lease with the rink, we have to file a request to get permission to do anything when it comes to changing the building or the property. So that would probably, in my opinion, free up like 2 spots in the front right. I met with Mike Chiasson regarding the area, the top left of the side parking lot. He felt like we could definitely expand that area and get 4 or 5, maybe 6 more spots. And finally, not talking about the street side because that's not my purview, but the back of the lot, we're in the process of doing a project on compressors and dehumidification for the rink. And one of the ways that we're saving money is to reclaim the waste from anything that's used to make the ice that's usually wasted. We're reclaiming it to use it for other functions within the building. And one of the ways that we're looking to reclaim is to use that waste and put some type of an ice melting pit in the back of the rink, so that instead of dumping the snow, which if you ever go in the back of the rink, you can see there's mountains of snow. And, not counting this past storm, obviously, which was a big storm, it hasn't been a ton of snow prior to that. And if you look out back, it would look like, you know, we've had blizzards, because that's how much snow we put back there. If we can put an ice melt pit where we want to, that would free up numerous spots in the back of the building.
So you clean the ice, snow's taken out,
Yep, dumped out back.
you take your cooling tower, how are you getting the heat to melt the snow in the heat pit?
Well, we don't have it yet, but that's something that we're working on. That's not something.
Now, what would it be, the heat rejected from the chiller?
It would be any of the wasted heat from the chiller that typically would just be wasted. We're trying to reuse it for energy savings. So for example, every 50 minutes when we make ice, we have to fill up the Zamboni, which takes a ton of hot water. So reusing the waste to put back into that heat, basically to go into the Zamboni, we're gonna save a lot of money doing that. So I'm looking into now, since we talked, trying to do a similar reclaim system for an ice melt pit that we would build, so that instead of going out back and dumping all the snow, we'd have a trench that we'd be able to dump the snow and have that melted without use of the back of the building.
Because, I mean, it'd be an issue with the sand.
Correct. Yeah, so
Yeah.
when we talked about letting people park back there the way it's constructed now, if we had cars back there, we'd have to have CPW go back and actually plow and sand it to make it safe for people. If the Zamboni goes out after that happens, the sand gets on the treads of the tire, for the Zamboni gets tracked back onto the ice inside the rink, and it melts the ice, so it doesn't work that way. So I would say that's, you know, if we're looking at all the different scenarios, the one on the far left of the rink, I think is something that we could, you know, do in the short term. Depending on, you know, with working with Mike Chiasson, and we're gonna kind of revisit that in the next week or so. The second one is getting approval for the, you know, the 2 or 3 spots. And then the third one would be the ice melt pit that we just talked about. And finally, it would be that street, Winter Street on the back side. You know, if that's something we could change the signage.
The city lot, the one that's adjacent to the state parking lot there.
Are you talking about across the street? Prospect?
No, same side of the street, the one that has the old Prospect Hill gates on it.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That empty lot there. This portion here, it's a good sized lot. How many parking spaces do you think you can get in there?
Just for clarity, I'm not completely sure what
Okay.
area. Do you have the map that I gave you?
I don't have it.
I have extra copies if you want.
Okay. I'll give one out to committee. Have you seen this map? No, no.
Do you have enough? Because I'm not on committee.
I think I do.
Thank you.
There's 2 there.
Thank you.
That one. There's the rink. That's Prospect Hill.
Just so I can see.
Yeah. If everyone turns the map so that the yellow portion is at the bottom, it'll make more sense if you put that. Yeah. So if you see the skating rink there, the yellow outline there, which I think it has an entrance and an exit on Taunton Pond Road also.
Yeah.
We're talking about, the orange is the current parking for the rink now, and the yellow would be to add in a good-sized parcel of land. Adding pocketing there would be a possibility.
Yeah, that's hard to say.
And,
Okay.
have, the director of traffic look into how many spaces can go here, and then on the, out on the front, right now, how many years left on the lease? Is it 7 or 12? I can't remember how many years left.
Right now,
It's a
we're
20-year lease, right?
Yeah, so right now we're in year 13, so we have 7 years left in the lease.
7 years left on the lease, and if I'm just making numbers up for, you know, sake of conversation. If they spend $50,000 creating a parking lot here, with 7 years left on the lease, how do you see the lease, the 20-year lease at the end of it going? A re-sign,
I can't imagine, I mean, personally, I can't imagine it going any different than it is now, just because I think the state's very happy because it took a huge burden off of them.
Mhm.
It's working for the city because Waltham is a priority there.
Mhm.
So I think the lease states that in order to extend the lease, you can do it up to 2 years before, but no later than, or 1 year before, but no later than, no earlier than 2 years, if we wanted to, you know, renegotiate.
and it would quite possibly be a 20-year lease again?
I would think so. I mean, I think that would work. But again, it would just have to be something we agree on with the state.
Mhm.
Right now, Waltham has a very good deal, because when all these rinks went out back in '05, it was negotiated that the state would get a percentage of the revenue that was brought in, and Waltham ended up getting 1%, where I know other rinks did a lot worse than that. So
Mhm.
Waltham did pretty good as far as that goes.
Wonderful.
And then there's just one other thing I'd like to
Go
add. I know you were asking about the back of the rink for the street as well, but I attended the traffic commission last month
Mhm.
to request a permanent light on Tottenham Pond Road to make it safer, where you were talking about where the kids are crossing the parking bags. If that's something that's in place, or any type of resolution that helps that become more safe, I think that would free up a lot of spots on the Prospect Hill side that would alleviate some of the parking concerns as well, so.
Wonderful. I think, you have is that a park and rec truck you guys parked here?
We have two that we keep there. One of them has a plow on it, so it's convenient to obviously keep that there. But what I did is, I asked, because we're not using the back of the building, I asked the guys moving forward until we get a permanent resolution to move those trucks either to Prospect or to the back of the rink. So that would definitely, the big truck could take up 2 spots, and the plow truck takes up 1, so
Right.
we definitely could free up some spots there. And one of the other things that we could look at too is when we have staff on duty at the rink,
Mhm.
potentially you're talking about 3 cars that are there because of the staff. We could have staff parking in the back and free up 3 more spots up front. So just by doing little things, I think for short term, we could definitely make a difference.
Right, because the frequency of Prospect Hill is used for, yes, 5 cars
Right.
frequently. So
You could make that
5, 8
just
spots, then,
Yeah.
you know, be less trips across Tottenham Pond Road.
Correct.
Great.
Yeah, which I think is better.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. I don't think anyone has any questions for him, or anybody has any questions?
I do.
Councillor Romard, please.
Thank you. Through you to Director of Recreation. So, Mr. Ruzzi, what did you just mention about, you appeared before the Traffic Commission for what, better lights there?
Just ask for a permanent light. You know, the intersection where well, not the intersection, but in front of the rink, we have a blinking system now.
Yeah.
Just looking for a red, yellow, green system so that as people are coming down Tottenham Pond Road, it's a little bit more evident to people.
What was the response?
They were doing a study on that.
Okay, good, because I've been requesting that for years. I have enough, it's always come down to the fact that, I don't know, it didn't meet certain standards, and maybe Mr. Garvin can speak to that, and I'll ask him to in just a moment, but, yeah, I put in that request several times,
Yep.
but I would absolutely be in support of that. I'm not quite sure if I understood, but any of this yellow section up here where there's trees and stuff, taking any of that for parking, in my mind, doesn't make a whole lot of sense when we have this great parking lot across the street, and all we need is just better safety at those lights. I'd absolutely be in full support of
Yep.
that. Plus the fact that, you did mention, we do have the historic old Prospect Hill gates up there, and I would hate to see anything happen to that. Plus, I think these trees act as a good buffer for the neighborhood back there with some of the noise, so I would certainly hope we could look at a full set of lights and safety crossings there before we did anything of that. But so, having said that, Mr. Garvin, if you could maybe fill us all in about what you know about the status of putting in, I'll say more secure lights there, but maybe the term is just a full set what your opinion is of that, and if there's anything new or if it's changed from when we've spoken of that in the past.
Sure, thank you. It's actually, I haven't officially made the report to Traffic Commission yet. It's gonna be on the April 12th, I think is our meeting, that, the agenda for that meeting. But just to give you an advance, kind of notice of what my recommendation is. We did the traffic study at that crossing during the school vacation week, which there's a youth hockey tournament that week. It's very busy. We picked a number of the very busiest times, basically when there were 2 games going on, followed by 2 games going on the subsequent hour, which we felt was kind of the busiest times in terms of parking. So we counted, how many groups of people crossed the street during each of those study periods, and ran the analysis. And even during those peak, what we felt were peak times, the crossing didn't meet the warrant for a full traffic light. So really, to meet the warrant, it should be an average condition, and really at the peak time, there are a number of families who cross there, but not quite high enough to meet the warrant. That's not to say that there's nothing we can do to enhance the safety, and I am going to make a recommendation to install an additional warning sign in advance, because the problem is really coming from the west heading eastbound, where you're going around a curve and heading downhill. That's where the visibility is compromised. The other direction is more of a straight shot. You can see those flashing lights much further ahead. So my recommendation is, I forget the distance, I think 300 or 400 feet in advance of the crossing, to put up an electronic sign that when someone hits the button over at the crossing, that advance sign will light up and say, yield to pedestrians ahead, or something like that. So when the rapid rectangular lights are flashing, that advanced sign is also flashing to give a little bit extra notice for those drivers, because I think that's the biggest safety concern, is for drivers.
Is that an RRFB? Is that?
The flashing lights are the RRFB, yeah.
Yeah.
But this would be a supplement to that. It would be illuminated at the same time as the RRFB.
Yeah.
I think that would address the biggest safety concern I have.
I think we will agree to disagree on that from now on forever, but in my mind, I don't understand why we still can't put, if it's not a full set of light, it's something that when it remains yellow or can be off all the time until somebody hits that, and when they hit it, it should turn red. That traffic should stop for complete safety of individuals, but again, that might be for another discussion, but we're talking about children here, we're talking about safety of people. A red light is a red light. It can only go when somebody presses it and they want to. It doesn't have to be a full set that runs through a cycle. There would be no reason for that, but in my mind, it's a very scary area. It's a very scary street to have to cross. And to your point around the curve and everything, some drivers, either they're not looking, but they may not see that yellow flashing light. I'm not quite sure, but we need to do something. We need to do something there, and I think the issue is not cut down trees and create more parking. It's provide a safety net for those individuals. So, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Brasco.
President.
Councillor Fowler.
Yeah, just 2 quick ones. The ice melt pit, would that be inside the building?
That would be inside the building.
So like in the drive?
So where the Zamboni's house now, there's from the rink side, where the ice is, there's a garage door that opens. You pull in now, and there's a second garage door that will let you go outside. Where it sits now, there'd be a 4-foot trench that would be dug, and then there'd be a cover over it. So if the new Zamboni, or our number 1 Zamboni went down, we had to bring something in from outside, you could still drive in and out. So it would be below, there'd be a cover so it would let you drive over.
And the other one, has the DCR when these leases have been up, have they sold any of these rinks
I don't know.
outright to the community?
I don't, to be honest with you, I think all of them signed similar 20-year leases, so I don't think it's all new territory, I think, so.
I mean, I know a couple of rinks that were MDC rinks.
Right.
that Now
They
belong
either
to,
went out-
like it down in Quincy, I think
Yeah.
it is, down up by the water.
Right.
So I've been to several over the years that were former
Yeah,
MDC.
when they
rinks.
did the MDC conversion, there was a lease program that most, I think maybe 10, I'd say 10 or 11 rinks went into the lease program similar to what we do, and there were some that were sold outright to different communities, but we were part of the lease agreement.
Well, hopefully when the time comes up, we'll look into that too as an option and see if they're willing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Darcy?
Yeah, thank you. I've tried to deal with the red light to the pedestrian crossing, and the bottom line is it doesn't meet the federal warrant. It's not anything about what you want or what he wants or what I want. The counts do not meet the warrant, so he can't sanction a full stop. That being said, and I want to thank the at-large council for bringing this here for more pride, because it is an issue. I suggested a couple years ago to build a tunnel between the parking lot at the Prospect Hill to connect with the skating rink. The topography is such that you could build a tunnel. The kids come out of their cars with big bags, the big hockey bags. They're not going to want to climb up a gigantic bridge like at Bentley University, but certainly enough room, and it wouldn't be that expensive to build a tunnel to really solve this problem about pedestrian safety. Because you're right, and the ward council's right, that people drive too fast on that roadway, and it's very dangerous. I think with the spaces that the councilor at large has brought up, the additional spaces, and then maybe longer term, the city council could look at maybe finally building a tunnel to connect the two parking spaces. It's long overdue, and God forbid any child gets hit on that street, because we won't be able to we won't be able to live with that. So I thank the councilor for bringing this matter up, and hope it goes forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor, anybody else? Councillor LeBlanc? Yes.
We do have another matter.
Oh, yes, that is correct.
I'll be real quick. Yeah, I would just like to see if the traffic commission could look into how many spaces we can get up here. And I do agree, you have the RFB, the RRB, but the issue is, we don't have enough parking for the rink. And people, like Councillor Darcy's mentioned that, carrying your big hockey bag across the rink and families dumping their kids off and then running across Don Pond Road with a hockey bag, when we can solve it by just creating more parking, I think is a better solution. If you could look into how many parking spots could be created, and obviously stay away from the Prospect Hill gates, and a reasonable number that would work. And then the second thing would be in the back of the rink, along the rink side, not on the neighbor's side, if, what could be created for parking spaces along the rink. So if some of the people in that neighborhood park there, because a lot of the people are coming from that area, I'd appreciate that. That's all I have, and I'd like to make a motion to table if no one has anything else to say.
Okay. The motion to table, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion's been tabled. Thank you. Yep, Councillor LeBlanc?
Right, somebody could take it
Somebody
from the
take-
table.
Can take out crosswalk safety.
I'd like to take the resolution for crosswalk safety, brought in by myself, Councillor LeBlanc.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
And I'd like to make a motion here from an off-committee member, Councillor LeBlanc.
All right.
Actually, is the
Oh,
president.
since you brought it in, yeah, okay, yes, the president, either one, either the maker or the president.
But thank you, and I make a motion to hear from Director Garvin.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no.
Thank you for being here. We've spoken briefly about this, really not at length. I brought in the resolution, Councillor LeBlanc also signed on with me. There was some discussion at the last committee meeting. The committee members generally had a favorable response to the idea. And the idea is, that there might be places in our city, crosswalks, where it makes sense to do as other communities do and use the signs that, go in the middle of the crosswalk that say, state law, yield to pedestrian and crosswalk. I want to be clear that nobody is suggesting that every crosswalk in the city needs to have one of these. In terms of me doing my research, I've actually reached out to many communities that have these. Some of the conversations have been limited, some have been more extensive, including my conversation with Lexington and with Watertown to sort of get the history around, you know, their using the units. And what I have found is I haven't found a community that started using them and then seriously considered pulling back and not using them. The individuals that I've spoken to say, you know, I mean, it's obvious, they don't make sense in every case. You need to consider sight lines and is the road wide enough? But generally, what I was proposing is that maybe there are crosswalks around schools. Maybe there are some crosswalks near elderly housing. I can think of one over at 48 Pine Street. And then maybe some other key locations, perhaps on you know, Main Street or Moody Street. There's a couple of crosswalks on either side of Hannaford, for instance, there on Main Street. And I think, well, you know, maybe there. So we did send some requests. You know, I want to hear what you have to say about that. There's not a whole lot of time left, but the floor is yours.
Thank you. There actually is, I did a little bit of research myself, there is some history of this in Waltham. I went back in the minutes of the Traffic Commission, and back in 1993, this was proposed at several locations, and I think it was implemented. And the locations requested at the time were Main and Rich, Lexington at the police station, Main, Lime and Hurd, Moody and Chestnut, and Moody and Taylor. And then it was voted to have the Director of Public Works at the time to determine whether those are appropriate, and those were implemented. And from what I've heard, all of those were pulled back because of they kept getting knocked over. They became, you know, an object in the road that was now a hazard, and all of those were discontinued. That's not to say there are no locations in the city, but I would say, you know, it's a traffic commission item that would have to be approved by a traffic commission, and I would recommend placing them in areas where the streets are wide enough and there aren't a lot of turns, left or right turns, that would possibly lead to these being knocked over. So
thank you for doing that research, because I had heard that somewhere along the line the city had tried a few of these, but then I couldn't actually find somebody who remembered them. Did your record show who initiated that request back in 1993?
Well, yes. Two of them, this was before my time, I don't know the names. So two of them were by Peter O'Callahan, one by Theodore Manning, and then two actually by Councillor Logan. So,
right. Well, thank you for that. So the good news is a lot has changed just in terms of the units themselves. They are better construction. They are sturdier. I'm sure you've looked out there. There's a whole bunch of different ones you can buy. I spoke to one community who said, well, they move a little bit and we need to adjust them. And then I spoke to other communities who said, what are they talking about? If they're buying the good ones, they're not going to move. They're solid. Do they get hit from time to time? They do. There is a resource. I mean, there's not just the resource of the initial investment purchasing them. Sometimes they need to be replaced. If you have a storm, somebody needs to go out and move them. But their signage and their safety signage. And again, when I look at the number of communities that have them, I think perhaps there are some crosswalks in this city where they would be warranted. Now, we made a couple of requests to you, and I thought one of them was to actually, you know, what would a budget look like for this?
Yeah, I don't have the exact numbers, but those are pretty inexpensive. Those
They're
are-
like $300 a piece?
Yeah,
Is that
something in that
like
range.
that?
So,
So-
I wouldn't expect these in more than, a dozen locations might be good candidates, so it's not a lot of money that would add up.
And my sense of how this was rolled out in at least a few of the communities that I spoke with is that they made an initial investment in some number of them. And then, the folks in charge just decided, okay, we're gonna do it here, we're gonna do it here, and then they placed them. And they sort of rolled out the initial program. It's interesting because, no other community expressed that they seriously looked at pulling them back, and it was a question that I had asked. But then, going forward, when somebody wanted to add one, that actually became an agenda for the traffic commission. So if we wanted to move this forward, what would you see as the next step?
I would see, a proposal from someone to the traffic commission that are these warranted at these specific locations. I would do the study, again, the factors I would look at, how wide is the road, how many pedestrians, is it a school route, and how many turns occur right at that location.
I mean, the risk inherent there is that you have people who aren't professionals just saying, oh gee, what about one here and what about one here? As opposed to a more general request which says, would you look at crosswalks in the vicinity of schools? Would you look at crosswalks in the vicinity of senior housing? Would the traffic commission entertain that request?
That can be the request, to traffic commission in general, because I know in the past there was opposition from some members of traffic commission. The fire chief is obviously retiring, so he had some hesitation. Whether the next fire chief would have the same hesitation, I don't know. Obviously, the public works director would have a strong opinion on this as well. I'd like to hear from traffic commission members and then come up with my own recommendations based on that as well.
Okay, so this committee could vote out a request of the traffic commission to look at crosswalks around schools, crosswalks around senior housing, and could they also ask for a recommendation of other crosswalks where, could it be that general?
Yeah, and I would maybe, it would be kind of a two-step process. Does the traffic commission accept this device in general?
Okay.
And then assuming that that's a yes, then I could give my recommendations, what are the most likely locations where I would recommend.
Okay, and that gets it to a place where you then would give your recommendations if it
Correct.
gets there? Okay, all right.
Thank you. We look forward to Councillor Randall LeBlanc. I know we are running short on time,
Yeah,
but
there's-
Try to make it as quick as I can. One quick thought is, in addition to this, communities like Wellesley and the Newton Lower Falls area, and I've spoken to this in the past, is that you have a crosswalk on, you use 40 Pine Street that is has some either speed or elderly people who don't cross as fast. Having signs, if it's not the ones in the middle of the street, in Newton Lower Falls, before the crosswalks, it's, 20 yards out, it says crosswalk ahead, and it's a big sign, and it's on a light pole, it never gets hit, busted, or broken. And then as you're approaching, there's another sign with an arrow, that says crosswalk, it might be 10 yards before, crosswalk ahead, state law, whatever. You've seen it 3 times before you get there. It's sort of, by the time you get there, it's a conscious thought, you need to stop. That would be one thought. And then in addition to hers about the schools, and then if you had any, maybe a list of recommendations also, Forest Street near the Veterans Field, it would be one thought for the signs. And when I was recommending the signs, I think you were thinking of the ones in the street, and I was thinking something different. And then also the one there, I think it's Our Lady's Church, has the, has the rapid beacon. That would be another candidate for a couple of signs if it's not there. So just a couple of thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brasco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you, to the traffic engineer. Just in simply to address the President of the City Council too. So right in front of the funeral home on Moody Street during visitations, we actually had to we purchased one of our own, you know, with actually a metal sign and a cement cinder block at the very bottom. You'd be shocked. First of all, I think the first night we had it out there, somebody hit it, took off half their car because the thing was so solid. But we got it down around Chester Avenue, which most people, it's a block away from the funeral. They dragged it with their car that far. That's how bad some of these. The other thing is, as you mentioned, with the narrow roads, when we put it out in the middle of the road and there was a car parked in a legal spot in front of the funeral home, and then the MBTA bus trying to pass on the other side of the road on Moody Street, it becomes too narrow. So the bus was trying to navigate around. It was a disaster. So then we decided to put it up kind of on the curb. Oh my God. They just don't, they hit that too. I mean, this thing, if you drive by today, it's still there, but it's bent like over that way. I mean, I know the new designs of them, the flexibility of the designs and the components they make up now are more, you know, suitable for putting them out there and hitting. And it's a great idea. I know in some of the other communities, especially like Belmont and stuff like that, Wellesley, you go through their downtown areas, they have these warning and these signs. But yeah, it's definitely no matter what you put out there, it's certainly going to be something that the people are going to hit. So we want to make sure that they're suitable for destruction. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Can we make a motion to table it?
All right. The motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Yes, just one last thing, Councillor Randall LeBlanc, go ahead.
But take the matter of the parking resolution at the Veterans Stadium off the table.
The motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Go ahead.
We're supposed to make a vote on that, so I'd like to request that we take a vote on the traffic commissioner to look into the parking spots in the back of the rink and on the city lot next to the rink.
All right, on the motion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The ayes have it.
I'd like to place that matter back on the table.
All right.
Thank you.
Matter back on the table, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Ayes have it. Councillor Romard,
If we could take the matter for Harrington Road off the table, please.
on the motion. Harrington Road, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We received some paperwork from the law department and Mr. Casaza in the engineering department. This week, it's a bit different than what we requested, and so for that matter, and it's a bit complex. I'm not sure why it's become so complex, but it certainly is. So for that reason, I would like to invite Attorney Learned, Mr. Casaza, and the mayor into the next meeting of the Public Works
That'll be in
to
2 weeks.
discuss Harrington Road.
That'll be in 2 weeks, correct?
Yes.
On the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The ayes have it.
Thank you. We can put that back on the table.
All right, we're gonna table that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The ayes have it.
We had Mr. Casaza in on the ACO resolution, but I think we run out of time. He's coming back in 2 weeks, so maybe,
Okay.
I don't know if anyone wants to make a motion to invite him back in 2 weeks to discuss the ACO.
Can someone make a motion to?
I'll make that motion.
Okay.
And that was to bring Mr. Casaza back in 2 weeks to discuss his ACL,
Administrative consent order.
administrative consent order.
Okay, on the motion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The ayes have it. You will be here anyways, Nick, in 2 weeks
Yeah,
anyways.
yeah.
Right, for
Okay.
Harrington, you'll be here.
All right.
Thank you, sorry we ran out of time.
Yeah, no problem. No
What is the wish of the committee?
Will be adjourned.
To adjourn.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Opposed, say no. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.